paid for the emergency flowers, rewrote the seating chart, and steamed her dress at 6 in the morning. Then, 10 minutes before the ceremony, someone told me the place beside her had been saved for her sister all along. People think betrayal always sounds sharp. A slammed door, a raised voice, a message you can screenshot and send to a friend with, "Can you believe this?" But some betrayals arrive wearing calm, neutral clothes. They come to you in a venue bathroom that smells like hairspray and eucalyptus, with someone speaking gently enough that for a second you almost miss how completely your place in the story has changed. Lena and I had known each other since we were 16. We met in a community theater costume closet, both of us digging through plastic bins for a navy cardigan that did not smell like dust. She was louder than I was, funnier than I was, and the kind of beautiful that made teachers assume competence before she had even answered a question. I was the one who remembered deadlines, kept backup safety pins, and knew how to get gum out of fabric with ice. We made sense together. She called me the person who made hard things feel handleable. At 17, that sounds like love. At 30, sometimes it sounds more like a job description you never realized you had accepted. When she got engaged to Owen, I cried before she did. Not because I was surprised. They had been together 4 years, and he had that steady, well-spoken patience that makes everyone else at dinner sit up straighter. I cried because Lena looked happy in a way I had not seen in a long time. There is a difference between being excited about a wedding and being relieved by what it seems to promise. She had spent the last year talking about adulthood like a room she was still trying to enter correctly. The right apartment. The right dishes. The right salary trajectory. The right photographs. Owen calmed that in her. Or seemed to. When she asked me to stand beside her, she did not do it casually. We were on her living room floor, surrounded by bridal magazines, paint swatches, and a half-finished charcuterie board we kept forgetting to eat. She held up a pale green ribbon, looked at me, and said, "You know you're the one, right?" I laughed and said, for a terrifying second that sounded like a very different speech. She threw a pillow at me. Then she got serious. "No, I mean it," she said. "I can do the wedding stuff with anybody. I only want to do it with someone who actually knows me." That sentence carried me through the next 7 months. Because there is always a point when weddings stop being romance and start becoming project management. The venue changed twice. The florist vanished after taking a deposit. Owen's aunt developed opinions about menu wording as if salmon and sea bass were constitutional matters. Lena spiraled every 3rd week. I handled vendor calls. I built spreadsheets. I ordered replacement candles when the first set arrived the wrong shade of ivory, which is apparently a thing adults are allowed to care about. I spent a Sunday driving across town because the tailor pinned her hem too short, and she was crying like the fabric had betrayed her morally. I paid for more than I planned to. Not recklessly, just in the 1,000 paper cuts way these things happen. I covered the custom hangers when her card got declined during a bank freeze. I booked the second hotel room for the bachelorette weekend when one of the bridesmaids dropped out. I bought the silk ribbon for the bouquets because the cheaper one looked shiny in photos. And Lena said shiny made everything feel fake. At one point, my brother called to ask if I was still coming to our father's retirement dinner, and I said no because Lena's shower venue had lost the dessert order. And she was too stressed to handle another surprise. He went quiet, then said, "You know this is getting weird, right?" I told him it was temporary. I told him this is what people do for their best friends. He said, "I'm not talking about helping. I'm talking about how none of this seems optional for you." I was annoyed enough to end the call. That should have told me something. The truth usually irritates us first, when it arrives before we are ready. Lena's older sister, Maribel, entered the wedding orbit late. She lived in Denver, worked in luxury real estate, and had the kind of polished confidence that makes other women unconsciously lower their own voices. Lena described her with admiration cut through by old resentment. Maribel was the first one to hit milestones. The first marriage. The first condo. The first perfectly lit Christmas card. The first everything that could be posted, framed, or compared. When she flew in for the dress fitting, I noticed the room change around her. Not dramatically. Just the way iron filings move when something magnetic gets close. She air-kissed Lena, called the boutique charming, and took over one of the velvet chairs like it had been saved for her. She was not openly rude to me. That would have been easier. She was interested in me in the faintly anthropological way some people are interested in assistants. "You've done so much," she kept saying. "Lena is lucky you have the bandwidth." Bandwidth. Not friendship, not history, not love. Bandwidth. At the tasting, she asked whether Lena was sure about the bridesmaid dress colors, then glanced at me and said, "Soft sage can wash some people out in photos." The table went still for just a second. Lena laughed too quickly and said, "Well, nobody's here to outshine me anyway." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because that is what women are trained to do, when an insult is still soft enough to deny. On the drive home, I waited for Lena to bring it up. She did not. So I told myself it had been one of those unpleasant moments that gets filed under family texture. There were other signs. At the bachelorette weekend, Maribel arrived late, skipped the restaurant reservation I had locked down, and still somehow became the center of the night by ordering champagne for everyone, with the exact casualness required to make generosity look effortless. The next morning, while we were cleaning up snack wrappers and gathering gift bags, I heard one of Lena's cousins say, "Maribel has more of the maid of honor energy, doesn't she?" I was in the hallway, holding a trash bag and a tray of half-empty glasses. Lena said nothing for a beat. Then she answered, "Tessa has the patient kind. Maribel has the loud kind." At the time, I took that as defense. Now I think it was confession. The wedding was at a restored greenhouse outside the city. Iron beams, old brick paths, white roses climbing structures that had once held tomatoes. It was beautiful in the overly edited, late afternoon way weddings are designed to be. By 6 that morning, I was already there. One bridesmaid had overslept. The place cards had been alphabetized wrong. The rental company delivered the dessert forks but forgot the cake knife. I fixed what I could. I retied ribbon around programs. I hunted down the missing extension cord for the string lights at the welcome table. I helped Lena's mother unpack emergency sandals, sewing kits, and a bottle of stain remover as if we were preparing for war, which, in a way, we were. Lena was in the bridal suite when I brought in coffee. She looked pale, beautiful, and frightened in the exact proportion many brides mistake for excitement. I set the cups down, knelt to smooth the train, and said, "You okay?" She nodded too fast. "Just nerves," she said. Then, without looking at me, "Promise me today won't get weird." I smiled. "I have spent 7 months preventing weird." That made her laugh. And for a few seconds, it felt like us again. Later, I zipped her into the dress, steamed one stubborn wrinkle near the hem, and hooked the tiny pearl buttons at the back of her neck. People talk about intimacy as if it only belongs to romance. But there is an intimacy in fastening someone into the shape of the day they have been building toward. I remember thinking, with ridiculous sincerity, "I'm so glad I'm the one here for this." The problem with devotion is how often it narrates its own injury without being believed. At 4:18, I was in the side hallway, holding Lena's bouquet in one hand and a backup lipstick in the other, when the coordinator, Renee, came toward me with the careful face people wear when they have agreed to deliver someone else's cowardice. "Hey," she said softly, "can we adjust the processional plan for a second?" I thought she meant timing. Maybe a groomsman was missing, maybe the harpist had started early. "Sure," I said. She lowered her voice. "Lena wants Maribel standing beside her during the ceremony." I smiled the way people do when a sentence is so illogical it takes a second to register that no missing clause is coming. "Okay," I said. "For pictures after?" Renee did not answer immediately. Then she said, "No, for the ceremony. She thinks it will keep family tensions down, and the visual lineup will make more sense that way." The visual lineup. It is amazing how fast the body understands humiliation. I could feel my face stay still while something lower in me dropped. I heard myself ask, "Then what exactly am I doing?" Renee glanced toward the bridal suite, as if the wall itself might be listening. "You'd still help her with the veil and bouquet, and then just take the front row aisle seat. You're still important. This is only about positioning. Only about positioning." That might have been the cruelest part. Not the change itself, the way it was packaged as technical. As if my humiliation could be solved by language from a floor plan. I asked whether Lena had told her to say this. Renee gave the kind of tiny pause that answers everything. "I should tell you that I did not explode. I did not throw the bouquet. I did not storm into the bridal suite and rip the pins from my hair. I wish I could say I did something cinematic. What I actually did was much smaller. I stood there, holding flowers I had helped choose, trying to understand whether this moment was sudden or merely overdue. When I finally walked back into the suite, Lena was sitting in front of the mirror, while Maribel adjusted one earring like she had always belonged in that exact spot. Lena looked up, saw my face, and immediately knew. That is an important detail. She did not look confused. She looked caught. "Tess," she said, "please don't make this hard." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sentence arrived so naked. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't know how to tell you." Not, "This got away from me. Please don't make this hard." As if the hardship were about delivery, not decision. I asked, very quietly, "When were you planning to tell me?" She pressed her lips together. Then she said, "I was hoping we could just get through today and then talk after." That is when I understood the full architecture. She had wanted my labor. Right up to the edge of the ceremony. The coffee. The steaming. The fixing. The smoothing. The carrying. She had wanted the benefits of my role without the public shape of it. Maribel stepped in then, with the polished urgency of someone who has spent years mistaking confidence for authority. "It's not personal," she said. "It just reads better if immediate family is closest. And, honestly, if we do this now, we avoid people whispering." People whispering. That was the logic. Not what Lena wanted. Not what I had been promised. Not what the relationship meant. What strangers in folding chairs might infer from a lineup. I looked at Lena. "So that's it?" Her eyes filled, which almost made it worse, because tears can make cowardice look like helplessness. "You know what you mean to me," she said. "This is just family politics. It's one moment. It doesn't erase everything you've done." But that was exactly the problem. I had done everything, and now we were discovering what everything was worth once the cameras came out. I set the bouquet on the vanity. Carefully, I remember being proud of that. Care is a form of self-respect when anger would be easier. Then I said, "You're right. It doesn't erase everything I've done, it explains it." No one spoke. Even Maribel for a second looked as if she had stepped onto a stair that was not there. I took the backup lipstick from my pocket and placed it beside the flowers. Then the tiny sewing kit. Then the safety pins. Then the printed schedule one had made with everyone's arrival times. It looked like I was emptying my purse. What I was really doing was returning a role. Lena started crying. Real crying now. "Tess, please, I need you here." I believed her. That was the tragedy. She did need me there. She just did not need me honored there. There is a difference, and once you see it, it becomes impossible to unsee. I asked, "Do you need me, or do you need the part of me that fixes your panic?" She said my name again, like that was an answer. So I picked up my bag, walked past the mirrors, past the women, pretending not to watch, past the eucalyptus bundles tied to the door handles, and out into the warm glass light of the greenhouse corridor. I sat on a bench near the side entrance for maybe 3 minutes. Maybe 10. Time behaves strangely when your dignity is trying to catch up with what just happened. One of the bridesmaids, Nora, found me first. She asked, "Did she really do that?" I nodded. Nora sat beside me and said, I thought I was imagining the whole dynamic. I kept thinking, no one would actually use someone this much and then move them for photos. That sentence steadied me more than comfort would have. Because that is what the comments around stories like this preserve, even when the details change. Not just outrage. Recognition. The moment other people confirm that the thing hurting you is not trivial merely because it is social, ceremonial, or easy for cowards to call dramatic. I did not go back into the bridal suite. I watched the first part of the ceremony from the side garden, through the greenhouse glass. I could see white chairs, aisles of candlelight, Lena's veil, Maribel's profile beside her, and guests turning their heads like flowers, chasing a source of heat. From a distance, it looked perfect. That is another reason stories like this linger. The image can succeed completely, while the relationship underneath it is collapsing. Perfection is often just injury with better lighting. Halfway through the vows, I realized I was not going to stay for the reception. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I could already feel what the rest of the night would require. Smiling through a narrative I had helped build where my usefulness survived, but my place did not. I texted Owen's sister, who had always been kind to me, and told her where I had left the emergency kit, spare heel caps, and vendor envelope. She sent back, "I'm so sorry." Just that. It was enough. I drove home in my dress with the windows cracked and my hairpins working loose one by one. At a red light, I looked at myself in the mirror and had the strange, clean realization that embarrassment is sometimes grief arriving in public clothes. Not grief for the ceremony, grief for the years of certainty that now had to be retranslated. Around 9, my phone started lighting up. 2 bridesmaids. A cousin. Then Lena. I did not answer the first 3 calls. I answered the 4th. The reception noise behind her sounded far away, as if she had stepped outside without really leaving the event. "How could you leave?" she asked, crying hard enough that another person might have mistaken her for the only injured one. I leaned against my kitchen counter and looked at the wilted ribbon mark, still pressed into my wrist from the bouquet stems. "You replaced me 10 minutes before your ceremony," I said. "What part did you expect me to stay for?" She said, "You're acting like I threw you away. I just needed to keep the peace. You know how my family is. People say keep the peace, when what they mean is, I picked the person I was less afraid to disappoint." I asked, "And that was me?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she said, "Maribel was already making comments, my mom was anxious, and I could not have everyone asking questions about why my own sister wasn't beside me." There it was. The final shape of it. Not love. Not gratitude. Not even preference. Optics. A wedding picture clean enough to explain itself without anyone needing to hear the truth. I said, "Then you should have asked your sister for 7 months of labor too." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. I think that was the first moment she heard herself clearly. But clarity arriving late is not the same thing as repair. She said, "That's unfair." I answered, "No. Unfair was letting me carry the role until it was time to be seen in it." We did not scream. We did not end in one dramatic declaration. The call just thinned out, like fabric worn through at the fold. A few days later, she texted me a long message about pressure, family, panic, and how she had always known I was the person who would understand. That line almost impressed me. Always known I would understand. There it was again. The old assignment, dressed as praise. I did not write back immediately. When I finally did, I said, "I think what you always knew is that I was the person most likely to absorb the cost quietly. I'm not doing that anymore." Since then, people have tried to summarize the story for me in smaller words. Wedding stress, family politics, miscommunication, one bad call on one emotional day. But small words are often just boxes people build around truths that would otherwise indict them. What happened was simpler and colder. A person I loved trusted me with labor, with spending, with private panic, and with the ugly, unfinished parts of her becoming a bride. But when it was time for the visible symbol of closeness, she handed that to someone else because it made the picture easier. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a ranking. And once someone shows you that they want your devotion more than your dignity, you cannot go back to calling the relationship mutual. I still think about the greenhouse sometimes. About how beautiful it probably looked in the photos. The vines. The glass. The soft evening light. Maribel standing in the exact place I had been promised. I am sure the images came out stunning. That is what unsettles me most, maybe. How often the world rewards what looks coherent instead of what was true. But the truth has its own afterlife. It lives in the body. In the pause before saying yes too quickly. In the part of you that starts asking, would this person still choose me if choosing me had to be visible? That was the actual gift of the story. Not wisdom in the glowing, healed sense. Just cleaner sight. Now, when someone calls me dependable, I listen harder. Sometimes it means trusted. Sometimes it means convenient. And sometimes the entire adult task is learning the difference before another important day turns you into backstage labor for a picture you were never meant to stand inside.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.